My daughter always said I noticed too much. She said it like it was a flaw. The way I'd spot a crooked picture frame from across the room, or know something was wrong with the car just from the sound it made turning into the driveway. She teased me about it, called me the neighborhood watchman, even though I never signed up for anything like that. I wish I'd noticed sooner. I retired from Canada Post 3 years ago after 31 years of routes. 31 years of walking the same streets. Knowing which house got their mail forwarded every January to somewhere in Florida. Which ones let the flyers pile up when they were fighting. Which ones had new locks on the door after a bad year. You learn things when you show up somewhere every day without anyone paying attention to you. I thought I knew people. I thought I understood what a normal household looked like from the outside. I was wrong about my own. My name isn't important. What happened is, but for the sake of telling this the right way, the way my counselor said I should, the way she said might help someone else catch what I missed for too long, I'll call myself what my grandchildren call me, Pop. It started this November before last. My wife and I had been together 28 years. Her name was Shelley. Is Shelley. She's still alive, which is something I have to remind myself of when I wake up in the night and forget for a moment that she isn't dead. That what happened to her was something she chose. Our daughter, Kristen, had moved back in with us the previous spring. She was 29, going through a separation, and she had 2 kids, Benji, who was 7, and a baby girl, just 14 months old, who everyone called Button because her real name, Marguerite, after my mother-in-law, was too big for such a small person. Kristen had been struggling. The separation was ugly. There were lawyers involved. Money was tight. When she asked if she and the kids could stay with us while things settled, Shelley and I didn't hesitate. That was March. By November, things had not settled. I had what I thought was a bad cold coming on. The kind that starts behind your eyes, makes your teeth ache a little. I'd been on a community walk with a few people from the Legion, and I felt it building the whole time. By the time I got back to the neighborhood, I was done. My chest felt heavy. I just wanted to be horizontal. I came in through the side door, the one off the garage, the way I always did. I was going to go straight upstairs, take something for the congestion, and sleep through until morning. The house was quiet, too quiet for a Tuesday afternoon, when Button usually made enough noise to be heard from the street. I stopped in the hallway and listened. Nothing. Shelley's car was in the garage. Kristen's was gone. She worked afternoons at a medical clinic in Canada 3 days a week. But where were the kids? Where was Shelley? I figured Button was napping. That explained the quiet. I told myself that and started up the stairs. That's when I heard it. It came from the room at the end of the upper hallway. The room we used for storage, boxes of Christmas things, luggage, the old filing cabinet I'd been meaning to go through for years. That room had a proper door with a deadbolt on the outside that I'd installed years ago because Kristen, when she was a teenager, used to sleepwalk, and I'd been afraid she'd fall down the stairs if she wandered in there half asleep in the dark. The deadbolt was on the outside. Always had been. I'd never thought about that. I heard a sound, a dull, repetitive knock, slow, patient, like someone who had been doing it for a long time and had stopped expecting it to work but kept doing it anyway out of something more stubborn than hope. 3 knocks, a pause. 3 knocks. I stood at the top of the stairs and I didn't move. Then, very quietly, almost too quiet to be certain I'd heard it, a voice. Pop? My heart dropped through the floor. I crossed the hallway in 4 steps. The deadbolt was thrown. I fumbled it open and pushed the door in, and the smell hit me first. Stale air and something sour, like old fruit. And then I saw Benji sitting on the floor with his back against a cardboard box, knees pulled to his chest, blinking in the sudden light like he'd been in the dark for a long time. There was a piece of packing tape across his mouth, but it had peeled loose on one side. Just enough for him to have called to me. Just enough. My hands were shaking when I pulled it the rest of the way off. Slowly, carefully, the way you do with something fragile. He didn't cry. He just watched me. Are you hurt? I said. He shook his head, but his eyes went somewhere else when he did it. Not lying exactly, but protecting something. I'd seen that look on his mother's face when she was small and didn't want to tell me something that scared her. How long have you been in here, buddy? He looked at the floor, since before lunch. It was almost 4 o'clock. Where's Button? I said. Something crossed his face then. Something complicated and frightened that no 7-year-old's face should know how to make. Not up here, he said, and then very quietly, Pop, check the basement. I want to be honest about what I did next, because I've replayed it 1,000 times, and I'm not proud of the order I did things. I should have called 911 immediately. I know that now, but in that moment all I could think was my granddaughter, 14 months old, and the basement. and I went down those stairs faster than I've moved in 15 years. The basement in our house isn't finished. It's the original foundation, poured concrete, a furnace, the water heater, some shelving I built years ago along the north wall. Kristen used to call it the mushroom cave when she was little. She refused to go down there alone. The lights were off. I hit the switch at the bottom of the stairs and stood there blinking. Everything looked normal. Shelving, furnace, the old chest freezer we kept for overflow groceries, a few bins of tools. I called out for Button. I know she was too young to answer, but I called out anyway, and I heard something, a sound, coming from behind the shelving unit on the north wall. I moved closer. The shelving unit was one of those heavy metal wire racks, loaded with paint cans and old hardware. I'd built it against the wall 12 years ago. I'd anchored it to the studs, but it wasn't against the wall anymore. There was a gap, half an inch, maybe less, and behind it in that gap I could feel cool air moving. I grabbed the edge of the rack and pulled. It was heavy, the kind of weight that makes your back file a formal complaint, but it moved. It swung outward, hinged on the left side like a door. Someone had rigged it to swing. Behind it was a door, a real door. Interior, hollow core, the kind you buy at Home Depot for $60. Painted to match the concrete wall so precisely that if you weren't looking for it, if the rack was in the way, you would never know. I opened it. The space behind was small, maybe 8 feet deep, 10 feet wide. A crawl-type area, really, running under the front porch and part of the garage. It smelled of damp and insulation and something else. Something I didn't have a name for yet, but that my body recognized before my brain did because my legs went weak. Button was there. She was in an infant car seat, buckled in, asleep or nearly asleep, a cracker crushed in her small fist. She was alive. She was breathing. I grabbed her. I held her against my chest, and I stood in that room, and I looked around at what was also there. There were shelves. Homemade, rough lumber. The kind that someone builds in an afternoon with a circular saw and no particular care for level. And on those shelves were boxes. Clear plastic storage bins, the kind everyone has in their garage. And inside them, visible through the lids, were things, children's things, small shoes, clothing, a hand-knitted blanket, green and yellow, a stuffed animal with one ear. None of it was Button's. None of it was Benji's. There were 4 bins. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for Button to wake up and start fussing. Long enough for my hands to stop shaking and for something colder to move in and replace the shaking. I carried her upstairs, and I put her in her playpen in the living room, and I called 911, and while it was ringing, I heard the side door open. Shelley walked in carrying grocery bags. Canadian Tire on one arm, Loblaws on the other. She was wearing her good coat, the camel-colored one she'd bought on sale at the Bay last winter. She looked at me and at Button in the playpen and at my face, and she stopped walking. "I found it," I said. She put the bags down very slowly. "I found the room," I said, and something happened to her face that I had not seen in 28 years. All of it went flat. Not guilty, not frightened, not even sad. Just flat, like a light turning off. "Malcolm," she said. "That's my name. I can explain." "There's a 911 operator on my phone right now," I said. She sat down on the bench by the door. She didn't try to leave. She didn't reach for her phone. She just sat there in her good coat with her hands in her lap, and she waited. The police arrived in 11 minutes. I know because I counted. I sat on the stairs with Button in my arms, and I counted the seconds, and I listened to Benji moving around upstairs. I told him to stay in his room, that everything was okay, that Pop was handling it, and I watched my wife sit on that bench and not look at me. She didn't look at me once. The officers were a woman and a man, both young, both professional in that way that tells you they've been trained to walk into the middle of someone's worst day without flinching. I told them what I'd found. I took them to the basement. I heard them on their radios calling for more people. More people came. It took 2 days to go through the room completely. I was staying at my brother-in-law's place, my wife's brother, which was surreal in the way that everything was surreal during those 2 days. And the investigators called me when they needed more information about the house's layout, about when we'd done the renovation that enclosed the front porch, about who had had access to the basement over the years. What they found in those 4 bins in that room behind my shelving unit were things belonging to 4 different children. They knew because of the clothing sizes, the different styles, items spanning what appeared to be a period of 12 to 13 years. I later learned, when the investigation made it into the papers, the Ottawa Citizen and CBC both covered it, though they didn't use our names, they used addresses, that the investigators also found records. A small notebook in a sealed plastic bag, tucked behind the insulation. I won't describe what was in it. I can't. What I can tell you is this. My wife had been fostering children, not through Children's Aid, not through any official system. Through a network, and I use that word loosely because it implies organization. And what she had was something much uglier than organization. Through a network of people who moved children nobody was looking for. Children whose parents had problems of their own. Children who could be presented as a relative's kid, a friend's kid, a kid from out of province who needed somewhere to stay for a while. Children who fell through the gaps that exist when welfare systems are underfunded and overworked, and when adults around them have learned how to look plausible on paper. She wasn't doing it alone. I learned this gradually, the way you learn everything, when the truth is being assembled from the outside in. There was a woman I had met, had coffee with in my own kitchen, who had come to Kristen's baby shower 3 years ago with a gift bag from Indigo and a smile I had thought was warm, who had been helping her, identifying children, making arrangements, keeping records of her own. I hadn't known. I know what that sounds like. 28 years, the same house, the same bed. And I hadn't known. Here is what I did know. Looking back, I knew that Shelley had always been particular about the basement, had always been the one to go down for things. Had at various points over the years suggested we put a keypad lock on the basement door. For the kids' safety, she'd said, and I'd agreed, and I'd installed it. I'd installed it myself. I knew that there had been a period, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when she'd had what she called a storage project going on down there, and I'd been happy to leave it to her because I hate sorting through old things. I knew that she'd had a friend group that I'd thought was a book club, and that I'd been quietly relieved I was never invited, because book clubs seemed like something that happened to other people. I knew that Benji had been afraid of the basement since before his mother's separation, and I'd thought he was just picking up on some leftover childhood energy from when Kristen was small. I knew that Button had been fussy 3 weeks before, not sleeping well, and Shelley had offered to take the night shift so Kristen could rest, and I'd been grateful. I'd kissed my wife on the cheek and thanked her and gone to bed. That's the thing about monsters in your own home. They don't look like monsters. They look like Tuesday. They look like someone who makes coffee the same way every morning and knows which checkout lane at Farm Boy moves fastest and watches the same shows you do and says goodnight. My daughter came home from her shift at the clinic to a house with police tape and a grandmother in handcuffs, and both her children being examined by a paramedic on the front lawn. I can't describe what her face looked like. I won't try. Some images belong only to the people who lived them. Kristen is doing better now. Not well. I don't think well is something that comes quickly after something like this. But better. She and the kids are in a new apartment in Gloucester, not far from the school Benji started in January. He's in a program now, one that specializes in what the counselor calls big feelings in small people. He talks about it without being prompted sometimes, which she says is a good sign. Button doesn't have language for any of it yet. Maybe that's mercy. I stayed with my brother's family until March, then moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the West End. I didn't sell the house. The lawyers said to wait, but I don't go back there. I don't think I'll ever go back there. The woman who had been working with Shelley was arrested in February at her home in Nepean. She'd been there during the police search of our property, but managed to leave before anyone thought to locate her. She was found through the records in the notebook. She is facing 6 counts. Shelley is facing 9. The Crown prosecutor told me when I asked that the cases were strong. I hold on to that word. Strong. I keep it somewhere I can find it when I need it. I see a counselor on Thursdays. Her office is above a coffee shop on Merivale Road, and sometimes when I come down afterward, I buy a coffee and sit at the window and watch people going about their Thursdays, collecting their orders, checking their phones, talking to whoever they came with. All these people who have no idea what someone else's ordinary life contains. I used to think I was good at seeing. 31 years of routes, all that practice, all those houses. I got a letter from Shelley last month. She sent it through her lawyer. I don't know why she bothered with the legal formality. Maybe she thought it made it more likely I'd read it. Maybe she was right. I opened it because I thought I needed to. I read the first paragraph, which was about how she wanted me to understand, and the second, which was about how it was complicated, and the third, which used the word love. Then I folded it very carefully along the original creases, and I held it over my kitchen sink, and I lit it with the barbecue lighter I keep in the drawer by the stove. I watched it burn until there was nothing left, and then I rinsed the ash down the drain. I don't have a clean ending for this. My counselor says I'm looking for one because I spent 31 years on routes that had beginnings and ends, that started and finished at the depot. That made a satisfying loop. She says life rarely does that. She says the work isn't finding the ending. It's learning to carry what doesn't have one. Benji called me last Sunday. Kristen let him use her phone. He wanted to tell me something he learned at school about how beavers build dams. Apparently they can change the course of water just by deciding where to put things, just by moving enough material to redirect the flow. He thought that was amazing. He wanted to know if I thought that was amazing. I said yes, I meant it. The world can be redirected. Damage can be found, not always in time and not always without cost, but it can be found. And sometimes the person who finds it is someone who came home sick on an ordinary Tuesday because their teeth ached a little and their chest felt heavy and they just wanted to lie down. Pay attention to the locked doors in your own house. Not just the ones with deadbolts, the ones people tell you not to worry about. The ones that are just storage, just nothing, just rats, just the wind. They are not always just anything.